Lightning split the sky like a wound tearing open. The thunder that followed shook the windows of Royal Oak Farm, rattling the glass and frames that had stood for 100 years. Rain hammered the slate roof of the main stable, turning the pristine gravel paths into rivers of brown water that snaked between the paddocks and disappeared into the darkness beyond the floodlights. It was the kind of night that old horsemen spoke of in hushed tones, a night when the veil between the ordinary and the extraordinary grew thin, when fate reached down and rearranged the lives of everyone it touched. Inside the foaling barn, the air was thick with tension. The mare's name was Midnight Crown, and she was worth more than most people's houses. A 3-time champion, bred from lines that traced back to kings and queens of the racing world, she lay on her side in the largest stall, her black coat slick with sweat, her breath coming in ragged gasps. 3 veterinarians surrounded her, their faces grave in the yellow light of the heat lamps. Something was wrong. Lily pressed herself against the wall of the observation area, trying to make herself small, trying not to be noticed. She was 16 years old, tall for her age but thin, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and hands that were already calloused from years of work. Her father was the groundskeeper here, had been for 20 years, and she had grown up on this farm the way other children grew up in playgrounds and schoolyards. She knew horses. She knew their sounds, their movements, the subtle language of their ears and eyes that most people never learn to read. And right now, everything about Midnight Crown was screaming that this birth was going to end badly. The mare groaned, a deep guttural sound of pain and effort. "Push, girl." The head vet, Dr. Warren, knelt beside her with his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Almost there now. One more push. The foal came in a rush of fluid and movement, sliding onto the clean straw that had been laid down hours before. For a moment, no one breathed. Then the tiny body moved, lifting its head, nostrils flaring as it took its first breath of the cold, storm-charged air. It was a colt, coal black, like his mother, with a single white star on his forehead that seemed to glow in the lamplight. His eyes, when they opened, were dark and deep and held something that Lily had never seen before in a newborn, a kind of knowing, as if he understood exactly what world he had just entered. Then Dr. Warren's face changed. It was supposed to be the birth of a champion, but Dr. Warren was about to make a discovery that would sentence this colt to death. But real quick, before he delivers the bad news, if you believe that every life has value no matter what the experts say, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you don't miss the rest of the story. Now, let's see what he saw. Oh no. The words came out barely above a whisper. Oh God, no. He stood up slowly, stepping back from the foal, his hands falling to his sides. The other vets crowded in, then recoiled, their expressions shifting from anticipation to horror. Lily pushed forward, her heart pounding. She saw the colt's body first, strong, well-proportioned, exactly what you would expect from bloodlines this prestigious. Then her eyes traveled down to his front legs, and she understood. The legs were bent. Not slightly crooked, not a minor deviation that would correct itself in a few days. These legs were twisted at 90-degree angles, the joints folded in on themselves like paper that had been creased and then crumpled. The foal lay on the straw, trying to move, trying to stand. But his front legs wouldn't support him. They splayed out at impossible angles, useless, broken before they had ever been used. Wind-swept deformity. Dr. Warren's voice was flat, clinical, drained of all emotion. Severe, bilateral. I've seen cases like this before. Is there surgery? One. Of the junior vets was young, still hopeful. Corrective procedures? Dr. Warren shook his head. Not at this severity. The bones haven't formed correctly. The ligaments are contracted. Even if we operated, he'd never stand properly, never run, never be anything but a cripple. He turned to face the observation area, where a figure had been standing in silence throughout the birth. Victor Hartwell was the owner of Royal Oak Farm. He was a man who measured everything in numbers, purchase prices and stud fees, racing times and breeding percentages. He wore a suit even at midnight, even in a barn, as if dressing any other way would be an admission that he was merely human like everyone else. Well, his voice was cold. What's the verdict? Dr. Warren took a deep breath. I'm sorry, Mr. Hartwell. The foal is severely deformed, both front legs. There's no realistic chance of recovery. Hartwell didn't blink. And what do you recommend? The vet glanced down at the foal, who was still struggling on. The straw still trying to stand, still refusing to accept what his body was telling him. Euthanasia. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. It's the humane choice. He'll never have any quality of life. He'll never walk, let alone run. Keeping him alive would be cruel. Hartwell nodded once sharply. Do it now. I won't have word getting out that Midnight Crown produced a cripple. It's bad for her reputation, bad for the farm's reputation. Tonight, this moment. Hartwell's eyes were hard as stone. I want this dealt with before anyone else sees, before morning. He turned and walked toward the barn door, dismissing the situation as if it were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. The foal made a sound. It wasn't a cry exactly, or a whinny. It was something smaller, softer, a sound of confusion and fear, of a creature who had just entered the world and already felt it turning against him. He lifted his head, those dark, knowing eyes searching the faces around him for something. He couldn't name. Help. Understanding. Hope. Nobody moved to give it to him. Wait. The voice was small, but it cut through the tension like a blade. Everyone turned. Lily stepped forward from the shadows, her hands shaking at her sides, her face pale but determined. She moved past the veterinarians, past the junior staff who had gathered to watch, and knelt in the straw beside the struggling foal. What do you think you're doing? Dr. Warren's voice was sharp. This area is restricted to staff only. I am staff. Lily didn't look at him. My father is the groundskeeper. I've been on this farm my whole life. Then you should know better than to interfere. But Lily wasn't listening anymore. She was looking at the foal, at his eyes, which had found hers and held them, with an intensity that seemed impossible for a creature only minutes old. At his body, still trying to move, still fighting to stand, despite legs that wouldn't cooperate. At the tiny white star on his forehead, glowing like a promise in the lamplight. He wants to live. The words came out before she could stop them. It doesn't matter what he wants. Dr. Warren's voice softened slightly, taking on the patient tone of someone explaining something obvious to a child. What matters is what's possible. And for this foal, nothing is possible. You don't know that. Miss, I've been a veterinarian for 30 years. I've seen hundreds of foals born with deformities. I know exactly what's possible and what isn't. The barn door opened. Victor Hartwell stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat, his face twisted with impatience. What's the delay? I told you to handle this. Dr. Warren straightened up. Mr. Hartwell, the groundskeeper's daughter is... I don't care who she is. Get her away from that animal and finish the job. Please. Lily looked up at Hartwell, her eyes bright with tears she refused to shed. Please give him a chance. Let me try. If I can't help him, if he can't stand in a month, then I won't fight you anymore. But please, just give him a chance. Hartwell looked at her as if she were something unpleasant he had found on the bottom of his expensive shoes. You, a 16-year-old groundskeeper's daughter? You're going to fix what one of the best veterinary teams in the state says is unfixable? Lily didn't waver. I'm going to try. For a long moment, Hartwell stared at her. Then slowly, his lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Fine. The word dropped like a stone into still water. You want the cripple? He's yours. But he leaves my stable tonight. I won't have that thing eating my hay, taking up space that could go to a horse with actual value. Take him to whatever hole you and your father call home, and don't bring him back. He turned to Dr. Warren. I want this documented. I want it in writing that I gave her the animal. When it dies, and it will die, I don't want anyone saying Royal Oak was involved. Then he was gone, striding back out into the storm, leaving behind the scent of expensive cologne and cold indifference. Dr. Warren looked at Lily with something that might have been pity. You know you're just prolonging his suffering. Lily gathered the foal in her arms, cradling his twisted body against her chest. He was heavier than she expected, warm and solid and alive. Maybe, she said quietly, but at least he'll have someone to suffer with. She carried him out into the rain. The lightning flashed again, illuminating the path that led away from the beautiful stables and the manicured paddocks, toward the small, weathered shed where the groundskeeper and his daughter made their home. The foal pressed his muzzle against her neck, and Lily held him tighter. "I've got you," she whispered. "I've got you." Behind her, the door of the foaling barn swung shut. Nobody came after them. The shed had never been meant for a horse. It was a maintenance building, really. A place where Lily's father stored his tools and equipment, where broken fence. Rails waited to be repaired, and bags of seed sat stacked against the walls. But it had 4 walls and a roof that mostly didn't leak, and it was theirs. Lily's father stood in the doorway, watching as his daughter laid the foal down on a bed of old blankets. His name was Robert, and he had the hands of a man who had worked outdoors his entire life. Thick fingers, scarred knuckles, calluses like leather. He didn't say anything for a long time, just watched. "The vet said he's hopeless," he said finally. Lily didn't look up. The vets were wrong. "Lily, they were wrong, Dad." Robert sighed. He walked over and knelt beside his daughter, looking at the foal with eyes that had seen too much hardship to allow for false hope. "Even if you keep him alive," he began, "even if you manage to nurse him through the next few weeks, he's never going to be a normal horse. He's never going to run, never going to be ridden, never going to do any of the things that horses are supposed to do. You understand that, don't you?" Lily finally looked at her father. Her eyes were red from exhaustion and unshed tears, but there was something in them that he recognized. A stubbornness, a fire that reminded him of her mother, who had died when Lily was just 5 years old. "He doesn't have to be a normal horse," she said. "He just has to be alive." Robert looked at his daughter. He looked at the foal, who had lifted his head and was watching them both with those strange, knowing eyes. Then he stood up and walked to the corner of the shed, where a pile of old lumber was stacked against the wall. "What are you doing?" Lily asked. "If we're going to keep him," Robert said, "we need to build him a proper stall. This concrete floor won't do. He needs straw, needs warmth, needs space to try to move." He turned back to his daughter, and for the first time that night, he smiled. "Well, are you going to help me, or just sit there?" Lily smiled back. They worked through the rest of the night. The first week was the hardest. The foal, Lily had named him Twister, for the way his legs seemed to twist in on themselves, couldn't stand on his own. His front legs simply wouldn't support his weight. Without help, he couldn't nurse from his mother, couldn't move, couldn't do any of the things that a newborn foal needed to do to survive. So Lily became his legs. Every 2 hours, day and night, she would go to the shed and lift him. She would hold his body upright, supporting his weight on her own shoulders while he nursed from a bottle that she had filled with formula purchased with her meager savings. Then she would lay him back down, massage his twisted legs, and try to get a few hours of sleep before the cycle started again. It was exhausting. It was heartbreaking. Every time she looked at those bent limbs, every time she felt the bones grinding against each other beneath her fingers, she had to fight the voice in her head that whispered the same thing Dr. Warren had said. "He'll never stand. He'll never walk. You're just prolonging his suffering." But then Twister would look at her with those dark, deep eyes, and she would see something that kept her going. He was fighting too. Every time she lifted him, he tried to help. His back legs would push against the ground, searching for purchase. His neck would strain, trying to hold his own weight. He was only days old, barely aware of the world around him, but some instinct deep inside him refused to give up. If he could fight, Lily decided, so could she. The second week, she started building the splints. She couldn't afford real medical equipment. The corrective braces that might have helped Twister cost thousands of dollars, money that her father didn't have, money that Hartwell certainly wouldn't provide. So she improvised. Pool noodles from the dollar store, cut in shape to cushion Twister's legs. PVC pipes from the hardware store, sawed to the right length and sanded smooth. Duct tape to hold it all together. It was crude, almost laughable, nothing like the sophisticated equipment that the vets at Royal Oak used, but it worked. The splints kept Twister's legs in the right position, applying gentle pressure that encouraged the bones to straighten, the ligaments to lengthen. Every day Lily would adjust them slightly, following a gradual correction protocol that she had researched online and in old veterinary textbooks borrowed from the library. The neighbors thought she was crazy. Mrs. Patterson from the farm down the road would drive by and slow down, shaking her head at the sight of Lily walking the strange splinted foal around the yard. That's Lily's distinct waste of time, she told anyone who would listen. Poor girl's lost her mind over a crippled horse. The kids from school were worse. They would ride by on their bicycles, shouting cruel things, laughing at the sight of the foal with his pool noodle legs and his lurching, unsteady gait. "Hey, Lily!" one boy yelled. "When's your robot horse going to win the Kentucky Derby?" Lily ignored them. She had work to do. The third week, she discovered the river. It was her father's idea, actually. He remembered reading somewhere that water therapy was used for horses recovering from injuries. The buoyancy took the weight off damaged limbs, allowing them to exercise without stress. The river that ran along the edge of Royal Oak's property was shallow in places, maybe 3 feet deep. Lily would carry Twister to the bank every afternoon and wade in with him, supporting his body while his legs moved freely in the cool water. At first, he just splashed around, confused by the sensation. Then, slowly, something began to change. His legs started to move in rhythm. The muscles that had been weak and underdeveloped began to strengthen. The tendons that had been contracted started to loosen. Twister was learning to walk. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't graceful. His gait was strange, a rolling side-to-side motion that looked nothing like the elegant stride of the horses at Royal Oak. But it was movement. It was progress. It was proof that the impossible might not be impossible after all. The months passed. Summer turned to autumn, and autumn to winter. Lily adjusted the splints as Twister grew, removing them piece by piece as his legs straightened and strengthened. She kept up the river walks even when the water turned cold enough to make her teeth chatter, breaking through thin ice to give her horse the exercise he needed. And slowly, impossibly, Twister transformed. The twisted foal became a yearling, then a 2-year-old. His coat, which had been dull and patchy in those early weeks, turned a deep, gleaming black, the color of coal, the color of midnight, the color of a sky before a storm. He grew tall and broad, with a chest like a barrel and legs that were thick and sturdy. Not pretty, as Lily had predicted. The deformity had left its mark. His cannon bones were wider than normal, his joints slightly enlarged, his gait still rolling and unusual. But there was power in that body, power and endurance and something else, something that Lily saw when she looked into his eyes. He had an engine inside him that never tired. The morning of Twister's 2nd birthday, Lily climbed onto his back for the first time. She had trained him gently over the past year, getting him used to the weight of a saddle, the feel of a rider's legs against his sides. He had accepted it all with the same patient determination that had carried him through his recovery, as if he understood that this was simply the next step in a journey that they were taking together. They walked out of the shed and into the pale winter sunlight. The fields of Royal Oak spread out before them, perfect white fences, immaculate pastures, horses worth millions of dollars grazing in paddocks that cost more to maintain than Lily's father earned in a year. Victor Hartwell's world. A world that had looked at Twister and seen nothing worth saving. Lily leaned forward and whispered in her horse's ear, "Ready to show them what you can do?" Twister's ears pricked forward, and they ran. The Regional Cross Country Gold Cup was the biggest event of the year. 2 years had passed since that stormy night when Twister had come into the world, and Royal Oak Farm was determined to prove that it still produced champions. They had entered their newest star, a gray stallion named Silver King, purchased for $500,000 and trained by the best coaches money could buy. The course was brutal. 3 miles of hills, ditches, water crossings, and obstacles that would test any horse to its limits. The organizers had designed it to separate the truly exceptional from the merely good, and this year they had gotten their wish. Heavy rains had fallen for 3 days before the event, turning the carefully groomed course into a treacherous mud bath. Horses that had sailed over obstacles in practice found themselves struggling through mire that sucked at their hooves and sapped their strength. By the final leg, only 4 horses were still in contention. Silver King was in the lead. Victor Hartwell stood at the owner's pavilion, watching through binoculars as his gray stallion approached the final obstacle, a massive stone wall, 6 feet tall, that stood between him and certain victory. "Come on," he muttered. "Come on, you magnificent beast. Just one more jump." Silver King gathered himself, his powerful legs churning through the mud, his rider leaning forward in anticipation of the leap. He didn't make it. The stallion's hooves sank into a hidden pocket of deep mud just before the wall. His momentum died. He stuttered to a stop, then reared back, refusing to attempt the jump. The crowd gasped. Silver King's rider tried again, urging the horse forward, but the stallion wouldn't budge. He had hit his limit. The wall was too high, the mud too deep, and no amount of breeding or training could overcome his fear. Hartwell lowered his binoculars. His face had gone white. "Get him out of there," he snapped at no one in particular. "Get my horse out of that mud before he injures himself." Dr. Warren was already moving toward the course, his medical bag in hand. Other vets followed, hurrying toward the stalled horse, who was now beginning to panic, his legs churning uselessly in the mire. And then, a sound. Hoofbeats, coming fast. From somewhere beyond the course boundaries. The crowd turned. From the tree line at the edge of the property, a shape emerged, black as midnight, moving like a force of nature, a horse and rider cutting across the open field, heading directly toward the chaos at the final obstacle. What on earth? Dr. Warren stopped in his tracks. The black horse burst through the last line of trees and onto the course itself, mud flying from its hooves with every stride. On its back, a rider in simple clothes, dark hair streaming behind her, leaning low over the animal's neck. Lily. She had been watching. From the woods, as she did every year, watching the horses she had grown up with compete for prizes she would never win. Then she had seen Silver King falter, seen the panic beginning to spread, and something had made her move. Or rather, something had made Twister move. The black stallion had felt it too. The distress of a fellow horse, the chaos of a situation spiraling out of control. Before Lily could even decide what to do, Twister had turned and started running, carrying her toward the source of the trouble. "What is that?" Someone in the crowd was pointing. "What is that horse?" Hartwell raised his binoculars again. His face went from white to gray. "The groundskeeper's daughter." His voice came out strangled. "The crippled foal." Twister didn't slow down. He was running at full gallop now, his strange, rolling gait eating up the ground faster than should have been possible. His wide hooves, the legacy of his deformity, spread his weight across the muddy surface instead of sinking. Into it, where other horses struggled, Twister flew. He was heading straight for the wall. "Stop her!" Hartwell was shouting now. "She'll kill herself! She'll kill that horse!" But no one could stop them. Lily felt Twister's muscles bunch beneath her as they approached the obstacle. The stone wall loomed ahead, 6 feet of solid granite that had defeated every horse that day, that had stopped a $500,000 champion in his tracks. "We can do this," she whispered. "I believe in you." Twister leaped. The crowd went silent. Later, people would argue about exactly how high he jumped. Some said 7 feet, some said 8. The official measurement, taken from video footage, would show that Twister had cleared the 6-foot wall with 5 feet of air to spare, an impossible jump, a leap that defied everything the experts knew about equine physiology. He landed on the other side like he had been doing it his whole life. His wide hooves hit the deep mud and held firm, spreading his weight, finding balance where other horses would have stumbled and fallen. He cantered to a stop beside the panicking Silver King, and something remarkable happened. The gray stallion went calm. He stopped thrashing, stopped panicking. His eyes, which had been rolling with fear, fixed on Twister and held steady. It was as if the black horse was communicating something, a reassurance, a promise that everything would be all right. "Easy," Lily said, dismounting and moving towards Silver King. "Easy, boy. You're okay." The vets swarmed in, pulling the gray stallion free from the mud, but their eyes weren't on their patient. They were on the black horse standing beside him, the horse that had just cleared an unclearable wall, that had run through mud that had stopped champions, that moved with a strange grace that shouldn't have been possible. Dr. Warren pushed through the crowd. He stopped in front of Twister, staring at the horse with an expression that Lily couldn't read. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, slowly, he knelt in the mud and ran his hands down Twister's front legs. "The deformity," he murmured. The bones healed differently, wider, more stable. He stood up, his face pale. This horse's structure, the way the cartilage hardened, the way the joints developed. He shook his head as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. It's not a weakness, it's an advantage. He's built for exactly this kind of terrain. Victor Hartwell pushed through the crowd, his expensive shoes sinking into the mud he normally paid other people to deal with. That's my horse. No. Lily's voice was quiet but firm. He's mine. You gave him to me. I made a mistake. I was emotional. I didn't understand. You understood perfectly. Lily stroked Twister's neck, feeling the warmth of him, the strength that had always been there, waiting to be discovered. You looked at him and saw something broken, something worthless, something to be destroyed. She met Hartwell's eyes. I looked at him and saw a life worth saving. Hartwell's jaw tightened. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook, the same gesture of wealth and power that he used to solve every problem. Name your price. His pen was already moving. Whatever you want. 100,000, 200, 500,000. Lily didn't look at the checkbook. She was looking at Twister, at the horse who had fought for his first breath, who had learned to stand on legs that weren't supposed to hold him, who had become something that no one, not the vets, not the experts, not the richest man in the county, had believed was possible. Sorry, she said. She swung back up onto Twister's back, settling into the saddle that she had saved for 3 months to buy, that had worn smooth from the countless hours they had spent together. He only runs for the girl who believed in him. She turned Twister away from the crowd, away from the cameras that had started clicking, away from the world that was finally seeing what she had seen all along. And they walked together into the field, the crippled foal and the girl who had refused to give up on him, their shadows stretching long in the afternoon light. The sun was setting over Hollow Creek when they finally stopped. They had ridden for hours, putting distance between themselves and the chaos at Royal Oak, finding their way to the quiet place by the river where it had all really begun. The water ran slow and cold here, catching the last light of day and throwing it back in shimmering ribbons of gold. Lily slid down from Twister's back and led him to the water's edge. He drank deeply, then lifted his head and looked at her with those same dark, knowing eyes that had captured her heart 2 years ago. The eyes of a creature who had understood, from his very first moment of life, that the world would not make room for him unless he made room for himself. They came after us, you know, Lily said softly. Her father had called an hour ago with the news. More. Offers. Interview requests. Training contracts. Everyone wants a piece of us now. Twister nudged her shoulder with his muzzle. She laughed, rubbing the white star on his forehead. Yeah, I know. We don't need them. She turned to look out at the river, at the place where she had spent countless hours walking beside this horse, believing in him when no one else would. The memories rose up around her like old friends, the struggle, the pain, the moments of doubt when she had wondered if Dr. Warren had been right all along. But she had kept going, and so had he. You know what the funny thing is, Lily said. Everyone's talking about that jump today, about how you cleared the wall, how you ran through the mud like it wasn't even there. They're calling you a miracle. She leaned her head against his neck. But I knew you were a miracle the moment I saw you. When you were 5 minutes old and your legs didn't work and everyone had given up on you. I knew then. The light continued to fade, painting the sky in shades of purple and pink. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out its first notes of the evening. We showed them, boy, Lily whispered. We showed them all. Twister exhaled slowly, a sound of contentment, of peace. 2 years ago, he had been born into a storm, twisted, broken, condemned to die before he had even drawn his second breath. A foal with no future, no value, no hope. Now he stood tall and strong, his black coat gleaming in the fading light, his strange wide legs planted firmly on the earth that had tried so hard to be rid of him. And beside him stood the girl who had refused to let him go, the girl who had seen something that no one else could see, the girl who had proved that the experts were wrong, that money couldn't buy everything, that sometimes the most broken things become the strongest of all. Lily climbed back onto Twister's back one more time. Come on, boy, she said. Let's go home. They turned away from the river and walked into the gathering twilight, not toward Royal Oak, not toward the world that had rejected them, but toward the small, weathered shed that had become a stable, toward the life they had built together from nothing but love and stubbornness and an absolute refusal to quit. The stars began to emerge overhead, one by one, and somewhere in the darkness, a girl and her horse disappeared into the night. Two souls who had found each other at the worst possible moment and had created something beautiful out of the wreckage. Something that would never run for those who doubted, only for those who believed.